Some stories don't just entertain us, they leave us shaken, questioning everything we thought we knew about love, loyalty, and truth. This is one of those stories. It begins like a simple tale of family, a marriage built on decades of trust, and the ordinary routines that bind two people together. Harold and Elaine had been married for over 30 years, living in a quiet town in Oregon. They weren't wealthy, they weren't famous, but they had what everyone around them admired: stability, companionship, and a love story that seemed unshakable. At least, that's what Harold believed. But one evening, everything changed. Elaine disappeared. No note, no message, no explanation, just gone. For 3 long days, Harold searched everywhere, calling hospitals, the police, even their friends. Fear clawed at his chest, and every hour that passed made him believe something terrible had happened. Then, just as suddenly as she vanished, Elaine returned home. She had no memory of where she had been. Her clothes were slightly torn, her hands scratched, and her eyes haunted. Harold, torn between relief and suspicion, held her close. But something about her story didn't add up, because, in fact, there was no story at all. Elaine claimed she couldn't remember a single detail. What Harold didn't know yet was that Elaine had returned with something far more dangerous than a memory gap. In her handbag, hidden beneath a scarf, was a small vintage camera. The film inside that camera would unravel everything Harold thought he knew about his wife, about his marriage, and about the life he had been living for 3 decades. This is not just a story about disappearance. It's about betrayal, hidden identities, and a truth so devastating it changes everything. Harold had always believed that trust was the backbone of a marriage. For 30 years, he and Elaine had built a life together, raising children, paying off their modest home in Portland, sharing holidays, and weathering storms both financial and emotional. He thought he knew her better than anyone alive. But now, sitting across from her at their kitchen table just a day after her mysterious return, Harold realized he was staring at a stranger. Elaine looked fragile, almost ghost-like. Her hair was tangled, her cheeks pale, and there was a distant look in her eyes that unsettled him. She wrapped her hands around a cup of tea, but she barely touched it. Harold tried to be gentle, but his voice betrayed the storm brewing inside him. "Elaine," he whispered, "where were you?" Her eyes flicked up to his, then away again. "Told you, Harold, I don't remember. I must have blacked out. Maybe I wandered. Maybe I hit my head. I don't know." Harold clenched his jaw. She had no history of memory loss, no medical issues. That could explain something like this? It sounded impossible, and yet she sat there, trembling. Unable, or unwilling to fill in the blanks. The police had been sympathetic, but useless. They had asked their questions, taken their notes, eventually concluded that since Elaine was home safe and unharmed, there was nothing more they could do. "People disappear for all sorts of reasons," the officer had said with a shrug. "Stress, depression, confusion. Be grateful she came back." But Harold wasn't grateful. Not fully. Relief was overshadowed by suspicion. Something was wrong, and Elaine wasn't telling him the whole truth. That night, when Elaine finally went to bed, Harold stayed downstairs, pacing. His mind ran wild with possibilities. Had she been kidnapped? Was she having an affair? Was she involved in something dangerous? Every scenario felt both absurd and plausible. It was then, while straightening the living room, that Harold noticed her handbag slumped in the corner. Normally, Elaine was meticulous with her belongings. A tea, but now it lay there unzipped, spilling slightly open. Guilt tugged at him, but curiosity won. He knelt down and peered inside. Keys, lipstick, a folded grocery list, and then something unexpected. A vintage camera. Old, heavy, with scratches along its body. It's the kind of camera that belonged in an antique store or a collector's shelf. Not in Elaine's purse. Harold frowned. He had never seen it before. Carefully, he lifted it out, his hands trembling. The film compartment was locked tight, but it was clear the camera had been used recently. Why would Elaine have this? Where had she gotten it? When Harold heard Elaine stir upstairs, he shoved the camera back into the bag, zipped it, and backed away like he had just touched something radioactive. His heart pounded. Later that night, as he lay awake next to her, Harold replayed everything. Elaine's disappearance, her scratches and torn clothing, the blank, evasive answers. And now, this mysterious camera. He told himself he would confront her in the morning. He would demand answers. But when morning came, he found Elaine in the kitchen, humming softly to herself as though nothing had happened. She smiled at him, fragile but warm, and for a moment, Harold wondered if he had Q and Tan reacted. Oh, maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe the camera meant nothing, but deep down, Harold knew better. The camera wasn't just an object. It was a clue, and whatever truth it held, he wasn't sure he was ready to face it. The next day, Harold couldn't shake the image of the camera from his mind. While Elaine busied herself in the garden, humming to her roses as though life had simply returned to normal, he lingered by the window, watching her. She looked so ordinary, so familiar. Yet that handbag in the corner of the living room gnawed at his thoughts, like a splinter under the skin. By afternoon, Elaine went to the market, leaving Harold alone in the house. The moment the front door shut, he moved quickly. He pulled the handbag from the corner, lifted out the camera again, and carried it to his study. His hands shook as he fumbled with the latch on the film compartment. After a few tense seconds, it clicked open. Inside was a roll of film. It had been years since Harold had handled one. In today's world of smartphones and digital photos, a film roll felt almost foreign. He debated what to do. Confront Elaine or secretly develop it. His gut made the decision for him. That evening, Harold drove across town to a small photography shop he remembered from years back. The shop was nearly empty, its walls lined with framed prints and shelves of dusty film rolls. An older man behind the counter raised his eyebrows when Harold handed over the camera. "Where'd you find this beauty?" the man asked, turning it over in his hands. "Family thing," Harold muttered, avoiding his eyes. "Can you develop the film?" The man smiled knowingly. "Of course, might take a day or two." Harold left the shop feeling both relieved and terrified. He had crossed a line. If Elaine ever discovered what he had done, she'd be furious. But his instincts screamed that whatever was on that film mattered more than her trust. When he returned home, Elaine was setting the table for dinner. She looked up and smiled, her face lighting up in that way that once melted Harold's heart. For a fleeting moment, he almost felt guilty. Almost. They ate in silence, Elaine chatting lightly about the garden and the weather, Harold nodding along but saying little. He studied her every gesture, every flicker in her eyes. She hiding something? Or was he imagining it? That night he dreamed of shadows. Elaine standing at the end of a hallway, her face blurred, holding the camera like a weapon. He woke drenched in sweat. 2 days later, the call came. The photos were ready. Harold drove to the shop, his stomach in knots. The old man handed him an envelope thick with prints. Harold thanked him quickly and returned to his car, locking the doors before tearing it open. The first photo made his blood run cold. It was Elaine, sitting at a cafe table. Across from her sat a man Harold had never seen before. The two leaned in close, their faces serious, almost conspiratorial. The second photo showed Elaine walking down an alley at night, the man beside her. Their faces were half lit by a street lamp. The third was worse, Elaine standing in front of a rundown motel. Looking around nervously, Harold flipped through the rest, his hands trembling. Every picture was the same, Elaine with this stranger in different places at different times. Sometimes they looked like they were arguing. Sometimes they were whispering, their heads close together. There was no evidence of romance, no holding hands, no intimacy. But there was something darker, something secretive in every frame. By the time Harold reached the last photo, he was shaking. It showed Elaine standing alone, staring directly at the camera, her eyes wide, almost terrified, as though she had just realized someone was watching her. Harold shoved the photos back into the envelope, his heart pounding. His wife had been with another man. Maybe not in an affair, but in something she didn't want Harold to know about. And the last picture, who had taken it? If Elaine was holding the camera, who had turned the lens on her? That night, Harold couldn't look at her the same way. She lay beside him, breathing softly in sleep. While he clutched the envelope in the dark, wondering, what was Elaine hiding? Who was that man? And why did it feel like this was only the beginning? The envelope of photographs never left Harold's side. He carried it to work, to the grocery store, even tucked it under his pillow at night. It was as though the glossy prints whispered to him, demanding answers. The man in the photos haunted him most. Tall, with dark hair flecked with gray. Sharp features. A stranger, yet someone Elaine seemed to know intimately. Harold's first step was simple. He returned to the cafe where one of the photos had been taken. It was a small brick-walled place on the east side of town. Harold had never been there before, but when he stepped inside, it felt oddly familiar, probably because he had stared at its image 100 times in the photograph. A waitress approached, smiling politely. Harold showed her the picture, keeping his voice low. "Do you recognize either of these people?" The waitress squinted, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, she's been here before. Couple of times, maybe more. Always with that guy." Harold's throat went dry. "Do you know who he is?" The waitress frowned. "No idea." But she hesitated, lowering her voice. They didn't act like a couple, more like business. Serious conversations, you know? Like they were planning something. Harold thanked her, slipped her a generous tip, and left. Business, planning something. The thought unsettled him more than if it had been a simple affair. He spent the next week obsessively retracing the locations in the photographs. The alley. No clues. The motel. Abandoned for years. Its windows boarded, its sign barely hanging. But locals remembered seeing Elaine's companion there. Some said he used to rent a room, staying for months at a time. Piece by piece, Harold built a picture of the man. His name, he finally learned from a bar owner who recognized the photo, was Daniel Mercer. A private investigator. The revelation hit Harold like a punch to the chest. Why would Elaine meet secretly with a private investigator? Oh, could she? Possibly be hiding that required this kind of secrecy. That night, Harold confronted Elaine not with accusations, but with a test. As they sat down for dinner, he asked casually, "Do you know anyone named Daniel?" Elaine froze. It was just for a second, but Harold saw it. A flicker of fear across her face, gone almost instantly. She shook her head. "No, why?" Harold forced a smile. "Just a name I came across, thought maybe it was someone from church." Elaine returned to her meal, but Harold couldn't eat. Her denial confirmed everything. She knew Daniel Mercer. She was lying. The next day, Harold did what he had never done before. He followed his wife. Elaine left the house mid-morning saying she was meeting a friend for coffee. Instead, she drove across town to a quiet residential street. Harold parked at a distance, watching Elaine knocked on the door of a small rundown house. A man answered Daniel Mercer. Harold's chest tightened. His hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. He watched as Elaine slipped inside, glancing nervously over her shoulder. An hour passed. Then 2. When Elaine finally emerged, she looked shaken. She hurried to her car and drove off, unaware that Harold trailed her all the way home. That night, Harold couldn't contain himself. After Elaine had gone to bed, he returned to the study and spread the photos across the desk. He stared at them for hours, replaying everything he had learned. A private investigator, secret meetings. A wife who claimed memory loss but clearly remembered more than she admitted. Around midnight, Harold opened the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out a bottle of whiskey. He poured himself a glass, his hands trembling. For 30 years, he had believed he knew Elaine better than anyone. But now, staring at her photographs with another man, he wondered if he had ever known her at all. And then, as if fate had been waiting for this exact moment, Harold's phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. If you want to know the truth about your wife, meet me tomorrow, 9 p.m., the old railway station. Harold's breath caught in his throat. His eyes darted toward the bedroom, where Elaine slept peacefully in the dark. He had two choices: ignore the message and cling to the illusion of safety, or step into the unknown and risk uncovering something that could destroy his entire life. He stared at the glowing screen, his heart pounding, and knew there was no turning back. The following evening, Harold arrived at the old railway station 15 minutes early. The place had been abandoned for years. Its cracked pavement was littered with weeds. The ticket booth boarded up, the tracks rusting under a blanket of ivy. A single street lamp flickered, casting long, trembling shadows. He waited in his car, hands gripping the steering wheel, eyes scanning the darkness. His phone buzzed again, sighed alone. Every instinct screamed at him to leave, but Harold had come too far. He slipped the envelope of photographs into his jacket and stepped out of the car. The air was damp, heavy with the smell of rust and rain-soaked wood. Inside the station, the silence was deafening. His footsteps echoed off the peeling walls as he moved cautiously down the corridor. At the far end, a figure emerged from the shadows. Harold. A man's voice called. Harold's pulse quickened. The man stepped into the dim light. It was Daniel Mercer. Up close, he looked older than in the photograph's lined face. Weary eyes, but still sharp, watchful. "You're the one who sent the message," Harold demanded. Daniel nodded. "I figured you'd want answers." "About what?" "My wife. Why you've been meeting her in secret." Harold's voice cracked with anger. Daniel raised a hand, calm but firm. "You deserve the truth. But it won't be easy to hear." Harold's fists clenched. "Then start talking." Daniel sighed, glancing around as if wary of being overheard, even in the empty station. "Elaine hired me 6 months ago. She wanted me to investigate." "Someone? She didn't tell you because it was you." Harold froze. "Me?" Daniel's eyes locked onto his. "Yes, she asked me to look into your past." Harold's mind reeled. His past. What past? He had nothing to hide. Ordinary life. Ordinary. Man. "Unless she thought you weren't who you said you were," Daniel continued, "that something about your identity didn't add up. She claimed she had reason to believe you were lying to her. About your name. About your family. About everything. Harold single quotes. Chest tightened, his breath shallow. For a moment, he thought Daniel was insane. But the intensity in the man's eyes told him otherwise. "That's ridiculous," Harold snapped. "I've been married to her for 30 years. Why would she doubt me?" Now, Daniel hesitated, then pulled something from his coat pocket. A single photograph. He handed it to Harold. It showed a much younger man standing beside Elaine in what looked like a college campus. Harold blinked, stunned. The man in the picture looked almost exactly like him, same height, same build, eerily similar features. But it wasn't him, this. Daniel said quietly, "Isimione Lane knew before you. His name was Richard Lane. He disappeared years ago, vanished without a trace. And Elaine believes you might be connected." Harold's blood ran cold. The name meant nothing to him. And yet, staring at the photo, a strange unease twisted in his gut. Like a memory buried too deep to surface, before Harold could speak, Daniel leaned in, voice urgent. "Whatever this is, Elaine is scared, terrified even. That's why she lied. About her disappearance, that's why she's hiding things. She's caught between loving you and fearing you." The words cut Harold to the bone. Fear him. Elaine feared him. He shoved the photo back at Daniel, his voice trembling with rage. "This is insane. I am not Richard Lane. I don't know this man. And my wife should have trusted me instead of running around with a private investigator behind my back." Daniel studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "Maybe you're right. Maybe she's wrong." But Harold looked at the photos again. Look closely. Do you really believe you know everything about her? Or yourself? The cryptic words echoed in the empty station as Daniel turned and walked away, leaving Harold standing in the flickering light, clutching the photograph of a ghost who looked just like him. For the first time, Harold wasn't sure what scared him, or Elaine's secrets, or his own. That night, Harold drove home in silence, Daniel's words echoing in his mind like a curse. Richard Lane, a man who looked just like him. A man who had vanished decades ago. Elaine terrified of her own husband. It didn't make sense, yet the photograph burned in his pocket like a brand. When he entered the house, Elaine was waiting for him in the living room. She rose slowly from the couch, her face pale, her hands trembling. "You talked to him," she whispered. It wasn't a question. Harold swallowed hard. "Yes, I talked to Mercer. And now you're going to tell me the truth. All of it." Elaine's eyes filled with tears. For a long time, she said nothing. Then, with a shuddering breath, she sat back down and motioned for Harold to do the same. Obeyed, though his heart thundered in his chest. "I never wanted it to come to this," Elaine began, her voice fragile. "For years, I convinced myself it didn't matter, that the past was gone, that you were the man I chose, the man I loved, and for the most part, that was true. But then, I saw something that shook me." She rose and retrieved a small box from the cabinet. Inside were old photographs, yellowed with age, edges curling. She spread them across the coffee table. In each one was the same young man from Daniel's photo. Richard Lane. Harold stared. The resemblance was uncanny. It wasn't just similar, it was identical. Elaine's voice cracked. "Richard was my fiancé. 32 years ago, he disappeared without a word. The police never found a trace. And then years later, I met you. And Harold, you looked exactly like him. But I told myself it was coincidence. A second chance. That fate had given me someone who looked like the man I lost but wasn't him." Harold shook his head, his mouth dry. "This is insane. Elaine, I'm not Richard. I've never heard that name in my life." Elaine's tears spilled over. "Elaine? Why do? You have the scar." Harold froze. "What scar?" She reached for his left wrist, pulling up his sleeve. There it was, a faint but unmistakable scar, thin and jagged like a healed burn. Harold had had it for as long as he could remember. He had no explanation for where it came from. Richard had the exact same scar, Elaine whispered. Right there. Silence. Stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Harold's mind spun. He wanted to shout, to deny, to demand logic. But deep down, doubt wormed its way into his thoughts. Why couldn't he remember parts of his childhood clearly? Why did some memories feel blurred? Elaine's sobs broke the silence. "For years, I tried to forget, to build a life with you. Then I started noticing things, your mannerisms, the way you say certain phrases, the way you look when you're angry. It's him, Harold. It's Richard." Somehow, Harold stumbled to his feet, his chest heaving. "No, I'm Harold. I've always been Harold." His voice cracked. "I'm your husband." Elaine's eyes met his, full of love and terror. "Maybe you are. Maybe you're both." "I don't know anymore." Harold staggered back, clutching his head. His world, his identity, his marriage all unraveling in a single night. He wanted to run, to escape, but his legs felt like stone. At last, Elaine whispered the words that shattered him completely. "I don't know who you are anymore." Harold stood there, staring at the woman he had loved for 3 decades, and realized he didn't know who he was either. The next morning, Elaine was gone again. "It's time," she left a note. "I need time. I need to find the truth for both of us." Harold read it a dozen times, each word cutting deeper than the last. The house felt colder, emptier, as though she had taken the very air with her. He looked down at his scar, at the photographs of Richard Lane, and for the first time in his life, he truly feared the answer to the question burning inside him. What if Elaine was right? And as he sat alone in the silence of their home, Harold realized the most terrifying mystery wasn't where his wife had gone, or what secrets she had kept. The most terrifying mystery was himself. Life is full of mysteries, some we solve, others we carry with us forever. Harold's story reminds us that even the people we think we know best can hold secrets. And sometimes the biggest questions aren't about them at all, but about ourselves. If this story moved you, if it left you thinking about love, trust, and the fragile nature of memory, then you're exactly the kind of person we created this channel for. Real Moments isn't just about telling stories. It's about exploring the hidden corners of human experience. It's the moments of heartbreak, the moments of discovery. It's the moments that change everything. Every week we share powerful truth of life. Stories that will make you feel, make you question, and sometimes even bring you to tears. Because behind every door, every face, every ordinary life, there is a truth waiting to be uncovered. By subscribing, you're not just supporting this channel, you're joining a community of people who believe that real stories matter. Stories that connect us, that remind us we're not alone in our struggles, our doubts, or our hopes. So if you haven't already, take a moment right now, click that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. And if this video touched you, please share it with someone you care about. You never know whose heart it might reach. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for feeling with us. This was Real Moments. And remember, sometimes the greatest stories aren't written in books, they're written in the lives we live every day.